Marie Pink.
Thank you. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be back with you today. I enjoyed my time with you last year on Emotional Poverty 1. And what we're going to look at is Emotional Poverty 2 and what that means. So what I'd like to do, just to start it off as kind of a review, because last year was a brutal year, let's face it, okay? And so one of the things I think is I just want to see how many things kind of to review or remember from last year. But take a minute and talk with your neighbor, if you don't mind right now. Tell your neighbor what, if anything, you remembered from last year, okay? That's been a while. All right. And how many of you remember about the hand model of the brain? Anybody remember that? Okay. How many of you remember about looking up? Yeah. How many of you tried looking up? Yeah, okay. So one of the things we're going to do is pick up on that again and then move into more depth with what we're going to do today. But what I'd like to do is you got a handout, a piece of paper along with your book. And what I'd like to do right now before we start, if you don't mind taking a picture of this web page up here with your phone, there's a whole bunch of free downloads on here and activities, so you can download them if you want and get them there. And I'll reference it later so you have it if you want it. Last time we looked at why kids explode and how you calm them down. Then we looked at what motivates behavior. Then we looked at why discipline strategies work with some kids and not others. We looked at how less than and separate from experiences lead to violence and some tools to keep your campus safer. And then we looked at male and female brains. How many of you remembered that part about the differences between male and female brains? Okay. Yes, people always like that. And then we talked about stages of adult development. Adults go through emotional stages just like kids do. And I don't know if you remember this, but from last year, what's the most dangerous age frame to be an adult? Talk to your neighbor. What's the most dangerous age frame to be an adult? You remember? Anybody remember? It's 35 to 45. Yeah. Yeah, some of you are in that age frame right now. Okay. All righty. So, what we're going to look at now is this. Here's what we're going to look at today in this book. Okay. First of all, we're going to look at a whole bunch of stuff about body tells. What people's bodies say, and it's FBI research on how you watch bodies. Do you remember when I told you last time what was the most honest part of the body? It's the feet. Okay, and so we're going to talk about some ways you look at how you can teach kids to know what's going on in their body, and then some tools for that. Then we're going to look at how you control impulsivity, some tools for ADHD and some tools for anxiety, and look at brain research and why head injuries create a lot of issues that we're not aware of, head falls, and talk about that. Then we're going to look at adolescent brains, okay? And how many of you in here are middle or high school? All right, how many of you have a teenager at home? All right, okay. And we're going to give you a lot of strategies, what's going on inside their head. Mark Twain used to say that you should, when they're 12 years old, you should put them in a barrel with a little hole in it. and then you plug it up when they get 16, and then you don't open again until you're 22. I mean, that's his concepts, but what we're going to look at is what actually happens inside their brain, and it's really, it was fascinating. I taught high school for 9 years. I wish I'd have known a lot of this then. We're going to look at social dominance, who's the alpha, how that leads to bullying. We're going to look at porn, what porn does to the brain, social isolation. We're going to look at rewards and risk analysis. Then we're going to look at the hippocampus, which is the stories you carry in your head. I'm going to give you some strategies. And one thing COVID has done is disrupted a lot of people's stories. Then we're going to look at adult stress. The issues around adult stress and what that means. There's a lot of misunderstandings about adult stress, and I want to give you some better tools for that. And then we're going to look at the last chapters about parenting. Let me ask you this question. How many of you in here are parents? Okay. Talk to your neighbor just a minute. How many of you would agree that parenting is probably one of the most emotional activities you can engage in? Talk to your neighbor. Right. Okay. And basically, what happens here with the emotions is that people either parent the way they were parented or in reaction to the way they were parented. It's basically not a rational activity at all. And in the school business, we approach it like it's a rational activity, and it's not. And then we wonder why our strategies don't work. So I'd like to give you some better strategies on that. And so that's basically what we're going to do today. So we know that you learn more if you have a goal for your learning. So if you don't mind right now, take a minute and talk to your neighbor. Which of these topics interest you the most? Take a minute and talk with your neighbor. Okay. All right. Now you kind of have a goal where you want to go and what you want to learn. Now, I need to say this as we start. COVID has really disrupted a lot of things for a lot of kids and a lot of adults, okay? One of the things that as we move through this, particularly when we get to the parenting section, I don't know if you know this, but in America right now, 40,000 school-age kids have lost at least one parent to COVID. So one of the things we know right now is that it's been very disruptive. And as I start on this, I need to say one other thing. It's not just to the kids, it's to the adults. In the research on vets who come back from war, if they're going to fall apart, they don't fall apart until 6 to 12 months after they're back. In other words, after they're over. So one of the things we're going to see this year is some adults who come unraveled. And I want to give you tools as we move through that to kind of understand what's happening. So the first video I'd like to show you kind of will set our theme for the day, what we're going to talk about. And so here we go.
Nightmares, flashbacks, hypervigilance, depression, sudden rages, sudden sadness, mood swings. Once, the public knew little about post-traumatic stress disorder. It was seeing what happened to our soldiers in the terrible trauma of war and the anguish that followed them home, disrupting their physical and mental health and affecting loved ones, that brought the term PTSD to public awareness. But we know now it's not just our soldiers whose lives can be overwhelmed by the symptoms of PTSD. Young people living in impoverished urban neighborhoods across America too often suffer through similar stressors.
The first time I got shot, thought I was gonna really, really die.
And I looked, and it was actually a body in the street. And for my kids to see that.
It happened so fast. They messed up my whole life.
I have like high anxiety, and I just feel paranoid all the time.
For the young people in the inner city, we actually see the full-blown syndrome of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Every bit the same syndrome that we see in returning combat veterans from places like Iraq and Afghanistan.
Children and young people growing up in pockets of concentrated poverty can often be exposed to violence, personal conflict, extreme anxiety, and other adversities as disturbing as some war zones.
If we believe that behaviors are shaped out of experience, and we know that's how the brain develops, then we should expect that people will behave based on their experiences. And they sometimes are reacting because those experiences were traumatic. If these young people have been harmed or injured by the stress in their lives, then what they really need is healing. We have two choices. We can ask ourselves, what's wrong with this person? Or we can ask, what happened to this person?
Hey, talk to your neighbor. What did you think about as you watched the video, and what did you go away with? Take a minute and talk to your neighbor. All right. So in other words, we're thinking about what happened to this person. And you're going to get a lot of that feedback as the year starts, what happened during COVID and what that meant. So before we begin on this first part, I just want to do a review of the hand model of the brain with you real quickly. So just have it, so as I reference these parts of the brain, you know where we are. So if you don't mind, take your hands and put them like this. And as you will remember from last time, this is the size of your brain, okay? I know that's not comforting, but it's the reality, okay? And as you know, your brain is about 3 pounds, and it's got the consistency of soft butter, okay? And bigger people have bigger brains, bigger hands, but Dan Siegel out of UCLA says that's a good model for your brain, okay? And you have the two hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And as you will remember from our conversation last time, male brains have more blood flow within hemispheres. Female brains have more blood flow across hemispheres. So your right hemisphere is more about emotion, your left hemisphere is more about language. So that's one of the reasons why it's easier for a female brain to have attached feelings and words, okay? It's hooked to your spine, okay? And remember we talked then about the brain stem of your brain. This part here, your palm, represents your survival brain. This is where you take your first emotional hit, anything that jeopardizes safety or belonging. And the first thing your brain has to decide, am I going to freeze, fight, or run? So from last time, which one do you do first? Anybody remember? It's been a while. Don't feel bad if you don't, okay? All right, you freeze, and then what do? Run, and then you fight. Fight's the last thing. So when a kid gets to fight, then you know that they're at the end of their rope. And what happens, it goes down your list. Now you will remember from your spine, you'll remember last time that we talked about how the feet are the most honest part of the body, and this is FBI research on, and I want to pick this up for you and take it even further with you so that you can not only watch bodies and know when they're in distress, but you can also, there's a couple tools I want you to teach the kids. But one of them is that When this goes down your spine, and you remember that your emotions are 200 to 5,000 times faster than thought. It goes down your spine so fast you can't remember, okay, and you can't think about it. How many of you have had a kid get in a fight or hit another kid, and when you ask them about it, they say, it just happened, I don't know what happened, it just happened. How many of you have had that? Okay, they're telling you the truth because it happens so fast. And so the feet are the first indicator of your discomfort. If the first thing your brain has to decide, am I going to run, fight, or freeze, then the feet are the most honest part. And what he said, Joe Navarro said, what you want to watch for is the relationship between the distress signal and the pacifying signal. So we'll talk today about your autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system, it controls 99.9% of what goes on in your body, and it's constantly trying to balance it. So if you get stressed, you got another part of your body that wants to calm it down, okay? So one is a distress signal, one is a pacifying signal, and you're constantly trying to bring it down.